Imagine waking up one morning as a citizen of France, going to bed that night as a citizen of Spain, and by the next week you're Dutch. No, you didn't move. The border moved around you. This isn't science fiction. This is the true story of one island that became the most conquered piece of land in human history. A place where people changed nationalities more times than they changed their clothes. 134 times. In just 335 years, this island switched flags 134 times. That's a new country every 2.5 years. Some years. It changed hands 5 times in 12 months. The island is called Pheasant Island, and its story will blow your mind. Because this isn't just about wars and treaties. This is about ordinary people whose entire identities were rewritten by forces completely beyond their control. Picture this, a tiny island, no bigger than a football field, sitting in the middle of a river between France and Spain, barely 200 meters long, so small you could walk across it in 2 minutes. But this island became the chessboard where empires played their deadliest games, where kings made promises they never intended to keep, where soldiers died for dirt that would belong to the enemy by next Tuesday. Our story begins in 1659. Europe is exhausted. The 30 Years' War has just ended. Millions are dead. The continent is bleeding, and 2 superpowers face each other across a river, France and Spain. King Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, a man who believed he was the state, absolute power in velvet and gold. On the other side, King Philip IV of Spain, ruler of an empire where the sun never set. These 2 titans had been fighting for decades, burning villages, slaughtering armies, bankrupting treasuries, and for what? Land, power, pride, the usual royal obsessions. Finally, they agree to meet, to end the bloodshed, to sign a peace treaty, but where? Neither king will set foot in the other's territory. That would be beneath them. So they find this island, neutral ground, literally in the middle. The Treaty of the Pyrenees, 1659, a document that was supposed to bring eternal peace. Diplomats spent months arguing over every word, every clause, every comma. They divided up kingdoms like children trading marbles. And they made a decision about this island that would seal its fate for the next 3 centuries. They declared it would be administered jointly. Condominium, they called it. Shared sovereignty. 6 months French, 6 months Spanish. Sounds reasonable, right? Wrong. Because what they really created was a permanent excuse for war. Think about it. Every 6 months, one country has to give up the island to the other, voluntarily. In a time when kings measured their manhood by the territory they controlled. The people living near the island didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fishermen, farmers, ordinary folks who just wanted to catch fish and grow corn. Now they were pawns in an endless game of territorial ping-pong. 1660, the first transfer. French troops row to the island, raise the fleur-de-lis. 6 months later, they pack up, Spanish troops arrive, raise the Bourbon flag. This becomes the routine, back and forth, blue, red, red. But then 1701 happens. The King of Spain dies, without an heir, and suddenly every royal house in Europe is claiming the throne. The War of Spanish Succession begins, and our little island, suddenly it's a strategic prize again. French armies march south, Spanish armies march north, and the island changes hands 6 times in 1 year. The soldiers stationed there barely have time to unpack before they're ordered to evacuate. Picture being a soldier on that island. You arrive in January wearing French blue. By March, your commander tells you to put on Spanish red. By June, you're back in French blue. By September, Austrian white. You'd lose your mind. The treaty said 6-month rotations, but war doesn't care about treaties. Whoever won the last battle took the island. Whoever lost it wanted it back. The island became a symbol. Lose it and you lose face. Hold it and you prove you're winning. 1713. The War of Spanish Succession ends. 13 years of bloodshed, hundreds of thousands dead, cities destroyed, economies ruined, and the treaty makers sit down again to redraw the maps again. They confirm the 6-month rotation, but they add clauses, subclauses, exception clauses. The document is so complicated that even the diplomats who wrote it can't agree on what it means. And that ambiguity, it guarantees future conflicts. 1740, the War of Austrian Succession breaks out, another royal inheritance dispute, another excuse for armies to march. And guess which island is right in their path? French troops fortify it, build stone walls, dig trenches. Spanish troops lay siege. British ships blockade the river. Austrian armies threaten from the east for a piece of land that produces nothing. No gold, no strategic harbor, no resources, just symbolic dirt that kings refuse to surrender. An old woman who lived near the island her entire life kept a diary. She wrote, "My father was born French, became Spanish at age 12, died French at 60. I was born Spanish, became French 3 times before my 10th birthday. I don't know what I am anymore." That's the human cost nobody talks about. Identity isn't just a word on a document, it's your language, your laws, your taxes, your children's education. And for these people, it changed like the weather. 1756. The 7 Years' War begins, the first truly global conflict. Battles rage from Europe to India to the Americas. And yes, our island changes hands again, and again, and again. French revolutionaries arrive in 1793. They're not fighting for kings anymore. They're fighting for liberty, equality, fraternity. But you know what doesn't change? They still want the island, because now it represents revolutionary ideals versus monarchist tyranny. The guillotine falls in Paris. The terror spreads across France, and soldiers from both sides die on this island fighting for causes they barely understand. The island doesn't care about ideology. It just keeps existing, soaking up blood regardless of whose flag flies above it. Napoleon Bonaparte rises to power. 1799, the greatest military mind of his generation. He looks at maps of Europe and plans conquest. And this island, it's on his map too, a tiny dot he's determined to control. Napoleon's armies storm across Europe. They win. For 15 years, France dominates the continent, and the island stays French. Finally, some stability, the rotation stops. French law, French currency, French everything. But empires built on conquest don't last. 1812, Napoleon invades Russia, disaster. 1813, the coalition armies fight back. 1814, Napoleon abdicates, and guess what happens to our island? The Spanish want it back. The British, who helped defeat Napoleon, have opinions too. The Portuguese, the Prussians. The Russians, they all gather in Vienna to carve up post-Napoleonic Europe. And they argue about this island like it's the crown jewel of the continent. 6 months French, 6 months Spanish. The rotation resumes. 1815, after all the death, all the empire building, all the revolutionary fervor, we're back to the same stupid arrangement from 1659. The locals are exhausted. Generations have lived through this madness. Grandchildren don't share the same nationality as their grandparents. Family trees look like rainbow flags of different countries. 1850s, relative peace. The rotation happens peacefully, almost boring. French officials row out in January and July. Spanish officials row out in June and December. Flags change, paperwork gets filed, life goes on. But then 1914, the Great War, World War I, trenches, poison gas, machine guns, millions die in the mud of France and Belgium. And yes, even now the island matters, because symbols matter, propaganda matters. French troops guard it fiercely, not because it has military value, but because losing it would hurt morale, would suggest weakness, would give the enemy a psychological victory. So men die, for symbolism. 1918, the war ends, the rotation resumes. 1939, World War II begins. Nazi Germany conquers France, occupies the island. The swastika flies where the fleur-de-lis once flew. Spanish neutrality means nothing now. Resistance fighters hide in the vegetation. Use the island for secret meetings, for smuggling Allied pilots. The river becomes an escape route. The island, a place of desperate hope in desperate times. 1944, liberation. Allied forces push through France. The Nazis retreat. Spanish and French officials meet again, shake hands, agree to resume the ancient rotation, as if the worst war in human history was just a brief interruption. The 1950s bring something new: tourism. People hear about this weird island that changes countries twice a year. They come to see it, stand on the riverbank, take photos, marvel at the absurdity. But the locals, they're tired of changing flags, tired of changing laws, tired of explaining to their children why their birth certificates say one thing but their current passports say another. 1980, France and Spain join the European Union together. Borders start to soften. The Schengen Agreement means you can drive from Paris to Madrid without showing a passport. Suddenly, national boundaries seem less important. But the island rotation continues, because tradition, because treaties, because neither country wants to be the one that gives up the claim. Pride outlasts practicality. 1995, a new agreement. The island will remain under joint administration, but no more permanent residents. It becomes a nature preserve, a bird sanctuary. The buildings are torn down, nature reclaims it. Today, in 2026, Pheasant Island still switches between France and Spain every 6 months. February through July, French. August through January, Spanish. Tourists watch from the riverbank. No one lives there anymore. The flagpole stands empty most days. Park rangers from both countries take turns maintaining the walking paths. Birds nest where soldiers once bled. Trees grow where cannons once roared. But here's what makes this story unforgettable. The island switched countries 134 times in 335 years. That's not a record that will ever be broken, because the world doesn't work like that anymore. Think about it. In 3.5 centuries, this patch of dirt saw the Age of Kings, the Enlightenment, Revolution, Empire, Nationalism, 2 world wars, the Nuclear Age, the European Union. Empires that controlled it no longer exist. Languages spoken there have evolved. Currencies used there are now museum pieces. But the island remains, silent witness to humanity's endless capacity for conflict over the most meaningless things. A farmer's granddaughter, now 90 years old, lives in a nearby village. She was interviewed last year. She said, "My great-grandfather fought for the island as a French soldier. My grandfather guarded it as a Spanish soldier. My father protested the rotation. I just visit it as a tourist. Maybe we're finally learning." The island teaches us something profound. Borders are human inventions. Nature doesn't recognize them. The river flows the same whether France or Spain claims the island. The trees grow the same. The birds sing the same. But humans will die for a line on a map. We'll kill for a symbol. We'll rewrite our neighbors' identities because a treaty says we can. We'll do it 134 times if that's what tradition demands. 134 flag changes, thousands of soldiers, hundreds of years, and in the end, an empty island, beautiful, peaceful, belonging to birds and trees now, not to France, not to Spain, to nature. The last ceremonial exchange happened 6 weeks ago. French park rangers rode out, raised their flag, checked the trails, rode back. In 6 months, Spanish rangers will do the same, and so it continues. But no one lives there anymore. No one's nationality changes. No one's children grow up confused about their identity. The madness has ended, finally. after 367 years. There's a plaque on the French riverbank now. It lists the major conflicts that touched the island: Treaty of the Pyrenees, War of Spanish Succession, War of Austrian Succession, 7 Years' War, Napoleonic Wars, World War I, World War II. 7 major wars, dozens of smaller conflicts, all over an island you can walk across in 90 seconds. An island that produces nothing, protects nothing, contains nothing of value except what humans project onto it. And that's the point. The island never mattered. What mattered was pride, control, the refusal to let the other side win, the need to plant your flag on something, anything, to prove you're stronger. History books call it the Island of the Conference because of the 1659 peace treaty signed there. They call it Pheasant Island because of the birds, but it should be called the Island of Human Stupidity. Because 134 flag changes is not a record to be proud of. It's a warning, a reminder that we're capable of fighting over nothing, of ruining lives over symbols, of maintaining traditions long past their expiration date just because we're too stubborn to admit they never made sense. The island still sits in the Bidassoa River, still switches between France and Spain, but it's quiet now. No soldiers, no cannons, no terrified civilians wondering which country they'll wake up in tomorrow. Just water, trees, birds, peace. Finally, after centuries of chaos, the island has found its purpose, to remind us what happens when ego overrides reason, when nationalism trumps humanity, when pride becomes pathology. And maybe, just maybe, if we remember this island story, we'll think twice before drawing our next arbitrary line, before planting our next unnecessary flag, before changing our next neighbor's identity without their consent. Because in the end, we all share this planet. We all breathe the same air. We all bleed the same red. And the only flag that should matter is the one that represents our common humanity. This is the story of Pheasant Island, the most conquered land in history, the island that switched countries 134 times, and the people who paid the price for other people's pride. Remember them, remember their confusion, their exhaustion, their resilience, and remember that every line on every map represents real human lives, real families, real consequences. That tiny island taught the world a lesson. Most of us just haven't learned it yet.